Pygmalion Effect. What is that? We'll talk about that in a minute, but before we do that, let me tell you a story of a man who sold hot dogs. This guy was hard of hearing and had trouble with his eyes, so no radio, no newspaper, and of course, no TV. But he sold delicious hot dogs. He would put up signs on the road and then stand on the side. He would shout and invite everyone to try his hot dogs. With his sincerity, his business kept growing. He increased his meat and bun orders, bought a bigger stove and more equipment. So business kept coming as he kept doing on what he did. Eventually, he asked his son to come and help him. And then something happened. So his son, who was supposedly well educated, he said, "Father, haven't you been listening to the radio or reading the newspapers or watching TV lately?" "No, why? What happened?" Son said, "There is a big recession happening right now. The business situation is terrible in our country. Unemployment is rising, increasing living costs, then there are strikes, pollution, inequality, drugs, alcohol, capitalism, communism. It is such a hopeless situation." So his father thought, well, my son's been well educated. He reads the papers, he listens to the radio, he watches TV. So he might be right. And then this hot dog seller began cutting down on his meat and bun orders. He took down all the advertising signs. He no longer bothered to shout and invite people. Then, you may have already guessed that his hot dog sales started to decline. After a few weeks, his business significantly dropped. And then this guy says to his son that, "Son, you're right. We certainly are in the middle of recession." Now this story underscores two things. First of all, intelligence is not equivalent to wisdom. And secondly, it also highlights the power of our mindset. Because if we condition our mindset for something, we almost always drive the outcome. I'm sure you would agree that this is a very powerful thing if we do it correctly. Now back to the Pygmalion Effect. This theory relies upon our self-fulfilling prophecy, which says that our tendency is to try and fulfill our own expectations about something or someone. So if we believe in something to be true or false, we tend to find more evidence to support our belief. Think about iPhone, for example. It is not radically different from other brand phones from a technical standpoint. After all, they all use the latest technology. But those who like iPhones tend to focus more on their positives and less on their negatives. Sometimes they simply ignore it. Positive expectations can change a person's perception of a situation just as dramatically as negative expectations. In 1968, social psychologist Robert Rosenthal conducted an experiment. He did that in a school with help of school principal Leonard Jacobson.
What we wanted to show was the extent to which teachers' expectations could actually affect pupils' intellectual performance.
So they randomly selected a few students and told their teachers that these kids had high potential to become high performers.
These kids' names were taken out of a hat. We chose them by means of a table of random numbers.
Apparently, this preconditioning of teachers' mindset affected how they taught these kids.
6 times something that's close to 32. Good. 6 times 5.
And then when we tested the children a year later, we found that those kids who'd been alleged to their teachers to be showing or going to show intellectual gains, in fact showed greater intellectual gains than did the children of whom we'd said nothing in particular. So the kids actually got smarter when they were expected to get smarter by their teachers.
According to Rosenthal, there are 4 factors at play here. The environment, more input or opportunities, more response opportunities or experimentation opportunities.
The last is feedback. The feedback factor works in this way. As you might expect, if more is expected of a kid, the kid is praised more, positively reinforced more for getting a good answer out, but interestingly enough is given more differentiated feedback when they get the wrong answer. One of the ways in which you can sometimes tell a little bit that the teacher does not have very high expectations for a kid is that the teacher is willing to accept a low quality response, or it won't really clarify what would have been a good quality response. Maybe because he or she feels, well, what's the use? The kid's not smart enough to profit from this additional clarification.
And much like every other study, this one was also criticized for various reasons. But the essence was quite clear. This effect certainly shows up in real life. While this experiment was done in a school setting, you may be wondering if it also works in real life. I would say yes, it does. And there is a reason why it works. I have frequently written and spoken about the MTBO model. MTBO stands for the mindset, thoughts, behavior, outcomes. We follow a very peculiar learning cycle. Our existing mindset provokes our thoughts, which then drives our behavior. This behavior then results in some outcomes. Now, if the outcome is favorable, it reinforces our mindset. If not, then it changes our mindset. And this constant cycle is one of the significant contributors to creating our personality and shaping our ongoing behavior. The same thing happens in a work setting. A manager's expectations of their team members often puts them in a loop of self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we were to take any learning from the hot dog seller story, from Rosenthal's experiment, from my MTBO model, if we try joining the dots, then a few points come up. First is, if our mindset is conditioned for something, we almost always drive that outcome, which is very powerful, so we must do it properly. The second point is that our environment often dictates our performance. It can accelerate or decelerate this mindset, thoughts, behavior, outcome cycle. And thirdly, instead of labeling someone as a success or failure, I think it is better to recognize that we all are work in progress. This way we can focus on learning rather than anything else. And this one is important because this is what we call as a growth mindset. If we were to succeed, we first succeed in our minds and then in reality. And if we were to fail, we first fail in our mind and then in reality. That is one of the biggest reasons why understanding our mindset and increasing self-awareness is extremely important. Our mindset does have a significant impact on our lives, and so it can also be conditioned to drive any outcome we want.